Hello everybody, welcome to another pre-season preview. This time we are doing CPL, formerly known as MPL 2. See, we got it correct straight off the bat, boys. Let's see how we go from that. As always, we have Michael and our MPL 2 / CPL / Capital. What was it called before this? Whatever it was called before this.
Capital League. So we're kind of back to the future.
Yep. Capital League expert Chris Webb. Webby, thanks for joining us today, and how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on. And everything's going good. I'm up in sunny Brisbane at the moment, so I'm enjoying the long weekend that we have.
That's awesome. Glad to hear you're enjoying that. Michael, thanks for joining again, and how are you going?
Yeah, been pretty good, Matt. I think enjoying the long weekend whilst it sort of lasts before we go back to work tomorrow. So just trying to soak it all in and enjoy it as much as I can. Yeah,
I beat you to it. I was already working today just for a little bit. So got done with that, straight into this. And before we get straight into this preview, we would like to thank our sponsor.
We here at M&M Podcasts are very proud to talk to you about our very first sponsor called Linemarkit, a new local business emerging in the sport and technology arena.
That's right, Michael. Linemarkit is a new business operating the ACT and surrounding regions, and their product delivers accurate line markings for all sports and special functions using the latest technology.
That's right, Matt. And this includes all sports that we either take part in or have watched on TV at some point. And this ranges from football, rugby league, rugby union, hockey, Aussie rules, gridiron, baseball, softball, athletic tracks of any size and associated disciplines and more.
Yeah, look, that sounds like it covers a lot of ground, Michael. And playing right now are the images and videos of this machine at work. And by God, it's a beauty. If you're interested in these services or know someone that would be, do not hesitate to contact the business owner of this fantastic new initiative, Ken Yalg, through his email, linemarket@tpg.com.au, or his work mobile 0493 241 646. Contact details and social media pages will be available to access at our Facebook page, M&M Podcast. But if you are watching this on Facebook, it will be attached to the post.
That's absolutely right, Matt. And you know better than anyone else here at M&M Podcasts, we believe this business is fantastic for local Canberra sport and surrounding regions, whilst it couples its work with the finest new technologies.
Formerly MPL2 is now the CPL, Capital Premier League, as we all know. There'll be promotion and relegation from MPL as well as CPL and State League now as well heading into this season. So that's another change up that we're all going to experience for the season 2022 moving forward. I think this sort of adds to the heightened intensity and storylines for the season that will occur. We will try to provide score updates from State League One occasionally when we're on the podcast discussing the different leagues and results and whatnot. So, Chris, first of all, what are your thoughts on this concept that's been introduced for the season 2022, where we've got now promotion relegation between CPL and State League One?
I think it's a really good idea. Everything kind of is about barriers to entry and trying to remove those. And obviously one of the things that was talked about was expanding the size of the leagues. And for a number of reasons, it was kind of thought that it was better to keep them at 8 and 8 in terms of the kind of competition balance and not wanting to dilute the competition. But at the same time, there needed to be that kind of access to the leagues for aspiring clubs. So having that promotion relegation go down to the third tier was kind of probably the easiest way to do that. And it really gives clubs, like the likes of Juventus and Madura and Bell North and Woden Valley, who are kind of keen to push up into that next tier, the opportunity. And really, rather than doing it by paper in an application process, they've got to do it on the pitch. And really, that's what we're here for. That's what sport is about, what football's about. So I actually think it's a pretty good concept. Hopefully it will work, but just got to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, and I think just onto that point, I think it's really good to see the progression of the whole sort of promotion relegation side of things throughout the different competitions over the last couple of years. Obviously, we had it with MPL and formerly known as MPL 2, and now obviously we've got the CPL and State League 1 dynamic when you tie that into it too. So I think it's really good that, like you said, it gives these different clubs in different leagues the opportunity to be able to move up in terms of level of competition. And like you said, I hope it works out, because it's certainly great to see, especially in Canberra football. Now, Chris, what are your thoughts quickly before we get into the preview for CPL? What are your thoughts on how reigning MPL 2 league champions O'Connor Knights are looking heading into their MPL season? Obviously, it's been a while since they've been in the NPL scene, but obviously they gained promotion last season due to their excellent 2021 campaign. So can you just quickly share your thoughts on how you think they'll do?
Look, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. They've recruited amazingly well, especially straight out of NPL 2, so out of the CPL, picking up quite a few guys from Queanbeyan. You know, I think I've talked to you guys before. Michael Adams, I think, was not only one of the best players in CPL, but one of the best players in Canberra. And picking him up is it's a huge pickup for them. They've picked up some really good young players from Canberra, Croatia, from their 18s. And you know, this one young striker who everybody's got a lot of tickets on. He could actually do quite a good job for them. They've retained amazing how much they've retained from the team that went up. So yeah, they've added probably 6 or 7 players, a whole bunch of guys from Tuggeranong, as I guess we'll probably talk about when we go through Tuggeranong's team. So yeah, there's about four or so guys went from Tuggeranong over there. So it's a solid team with a lot of Premier League like NPL first grade Canberra experience. So I think they're going to do pretty well. But again, the thing about NPL 1 is somebody has to come last, and there is no really weak side. If you look at it, I think a lot of people were probably kind of putting that tag on West Canberra Wanderers they had previously. But if you look at some of their results in the last 3 or 4 weeks, they're in quite good form. So, you know, even Olympic, Belconnen, none of them really look like they're struggling too much. So while O'Connor look pretty strong, who knows? I think that league is getting just tougher and tougher in terms of you could come third or you could come last. And there's probably 5 teams that kind of fit that mold. So we'll just have to wait and see. But look, I don't think it would be a shock to anybody if they kind of snuck a 4th spot and made the finals. Equally, I don't think it'd be a huge shock if they ended up bouncing back down again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a great point that you touched on there was that they were able to keep a hold of a lot of their players that did really well for them last season in order to gain promotion. And I think that's key when you're sort of moving from one league to another, especially in a more difficult competition, having that player retention. So, I mean, I think they're going to cause a fair few surprises. Like you said, they've got a great squad. And like Matt and I were discussing on last week's episode, it's going to be a great game between O'Connor and Canberra, Croatia when that match sort of pops around. So plenty of exciting times ahead.
Let's get straight into it, though. ANU FC, let's begin with them. Their coach this season is Talal Safar. 2021 position on the table was 2nd place, and their points and win-loss record was 12 wins, 3 draws, 1 loss, 39 points overall. Very, very strong season from ANU last year. They were neck and neck with O'Connor all the way until lockdown when the suspension of the season happened. They only played each other once, like we mentioned on last season, and that was a 1-0 win to O'Connor, which in hindsight was the victory that ended up leading them to promotion. Mm-hmm. Adam Condopadero, the godfather of ANU football, as Webby likes to call him, had a very strong season. They showed their tactical flexibility. They could sit back, counter with pace. They could dominate play and play, dominate possession whenever they needed to. They were very similar to O'Connor. They were a total package. It's why they were both of the teams to at the top of NPL 2. He steps down. In comes Talal Safar, very experienced and accomplished coach in his own right. I believe this is his first grade job in Canberra, but coach does have a lot of experience. He's also going for his A license as well, so he has all that to put up his sleeve. He had a very good season last year with Monaro Panthers under 23s, where they were league champions. That's always been a very strong side there. But in the past, they've usually started strong and haven't finished too well in the league, and then they have made the final and won the final. But Talal was able to win that league title for them. Some of the stalwarts have left the club, like Rowan Peterkin, Sam Carters. In comes the likes of Bruno and Brulio Melo from Monaro under 23s, also Hassan Al Nawasir from White Eagles, who's been really good for them recently. And these players all have something in common. They're all players that Talal understands and has played and has coached before, so that'll help make for a fast transition for those players. It's going to be interesting to see how they go, because Talal isn't from that ANU sphere of coaches, where recently they've had a lot of ANU sphere of coaches. But we all know that Talal is a really good coach, so it's going to be interesting to see if it's a fast transition for him and the team to get together and hit the ground running. No doubt, though, the aim would be for ANU to get promoted. They were close last season, so we'll just have to wait and see. But at the moment, they probably look like the strongest team on paper, and if it's based on anything on last year's form, you would consider them favourites. So it's going to be really interesting to see how everything comes together. Chris, what are your thoughts on ANU this season? You've been following them, obviously, for a very long time in this league. They've always been very strong. Can they go that one extra step further? And are there any ins and outs, major ones that I didn't mention there?
ANU, as we kind of said previously, in last year's, they were very unlucky not to win the competition, and really it was kind of in the boardroom that they went down. And I think, as we discussed at length, it was probably the right decision, and O'Connor probably had just that little bit of the wood over them. But they were inches away from being the top team, and now I think with O'Connor out of the picture, they clearly are the top team. ANU's amazing strength really comes from how unified they are, and essentially that level of retention, the consistency of the teams that they've put out year after year is something, as we'll go through the other teams, that no other team, especially this season has seen turnover galore across most of the teams, yet ANU hardly anything. And that's just every year, hardly anything. And everyone else struggles to match them, and that consistency always just gets them through, especially through a long season. Obviously, they have all the talent. Losing Sam Carters, we talked about it. He's the best player in this competition, been the best player when he's been in this competition for the last 8 or so years. It's a massive loss. An absolute engine in the central midfield, who crazily won the Golden Boot as well, from not even from the 10 position, from deep lying central midfield position. He's going to be a huge loss for them. And really, the replacements that they've kind of picked up in the midfield are probably not as big, and no one really that kind of comes to that level of Sam. What I think is very likely to happen is that probably one of their young centre backs is likely to push into central midfield to cover that position. The Mellow boys will probably really come in to cover that backline position. The loss then, you add the loss in of Rowan, Peterkin and Chine. Really, that is those with Sam, I think that's more than half the goals that they scored last year between those 3 players. So collectively, it's a big loss. But I think that Andrew Manley also kind of comes back into the team. He was coaching their 23s and did a fantastic job with their 23s last year. So he's come back as a striker. He's a former Golden Boot at this level. So he'll kind of replace some goals. Hassan, who will kind of come in at that striker /10 position from White Eagles, a fantastic player, and can also kind of replace some of the goals. And someone else that they got is young Liam Neeson, who's obviously has lots of jokes about him, about his taken abilities, but he missed 80% of the season last year. He had pretty much a season-ending injury early on, and he's another fantastic striker. So those three kind of coming back in really probably go a long way to replacing the goals that have left. You add in Chase Deans up front and Max Model, who again I talk about as one of the top 3 or 4 players in this league. He hasn't scored many goals the last couple of years, but when he gets going, Max could end up easily getting the golden boot. So look, I think that going forward, they're going to be fantastic. Where I kind of am a little bit worried about them is probably the depth of their backline. ANU's depth has always been ridiculous because their 23s have been so strong. I think this year their 23s are probably not as strong as they used to be. So the depth coming back in that backline might really not be there. And across 21 weeks, depth can often play a role. So another big loss that they had, I don't think you mentioned, is Jake Bradley, their goalkeeper. So they kind of had the 2 key goalkeepers with Keegan Jackson and Jake Bradley. So Jake's out of the picture and Keegan's in, but Juan Maro is a goalkeeper that's kind of come in to replace him, but we'll see how that goes. In the middle, I'm interested to see, I guess will really be Sam Carter's direct replacement, Joel Ingram, who's come from the Brisbane Premier League from Toowong. So the Brisbane Premier League's 3rd tier in Queensland, so probably a slightly higher level than our CPL. So I'll be interested to see how he fits in.
It certainly will be. And you brought up a good point about depth, because at the end of the day, we all know depth's important in general, but I mentioned this on last week's show as well. COVID has to be considered as well with, the 1 week quarantining and whatnot. And even like if you're a close contact as well. So depth has always been important, especially for a league. But I would say it's even more important now than ever, because now you have to include the new COVID rules. And obviously there's a lot more cases now than there was when we had the leagues the last 2 years. And we didn't really need to consider that. Like we more considered COVID in terms of travel and lockdowns, but we weren't really considering in terms of people actually getting cases, because there just weren't that many. Now there's a lot. So I'm glad you brought that up. There's definitely something that needs to be, that I'm sure every single, coach has considered in terms of trying to get more depth or maybe just bring a bit more accessibility between 23s and first grade, because it will most likely be needed. And there's a decent amount of teams here where they didn't have a lot of depth last season, but they've added more depth this season, which includes their 23s, which we will mention later. All right, who do we have next up, Michael?
Yeah, next up, we've got the Brindabella Blues, coached by Ray Juna this season. Last season, they finished 8th in 2021, and their points win-loss record wasn't amazing last season. We know the struggles that they endured. They only finished with 2 wins, 1 draw, 14 losses for only 7 points across the shortened season last year. And like I mentioned at the top, it wasn't a season to remember for the Brindies. We said on many occasions that former coach Glavanich, his side were unlucky in some games, hitting the post, God knows how many times, and ultimately their defensive record didn't help their cause either. But you've got a coach like Ray Juna coming in, arguably the most accomplished and qualified coach to come out of Canberra in quite some time. And I mean, I can speak to his resume. He's got stints at Canberra United, the Canberra United Academy, the Central Coast Mariners, youth squads, amongst others. So they've got a fantastic coach coming in that can really sort of look to change their fortunes around and improve their performance in 2022. In saying that, they've lost some of their key players from last season, such as Zach Lawrence and Niko Blazovic, to mention a couple. But in saying that, they've also managed to regain Curtis Schaefer from Belconnen United. So obviously he was at Brindies last season before he made that switch over to Belco in MPL. And they've also managed to bring in Ray Junior's son, Christian Junior from Tigers FC, which I think is a massive help for Brindis in terms of their defense. Like I mentioned, they struggled a lot defensively last season. You know, they couldn't seem to keep the ball out of the back of the net. But I think bringing in a player like Christian Junior, who's been back in Canberra for a couple of years now, and he's a great young player, a great defender. He'll slot straight into that back line, and I think he'll improve their defensive capabilities massively. So, you know, they'll be looking to make up for last season and improve on their results. You know, and they'll be looking to take some scalps of, you know, some of the bigger teams like ANU, like we just mentioned, and, you know, the White Eagles and the Queanbeyan cities of the competition. So, you know, we'll see how they go, but I think they've managed to, you know, although they've lost a few key players, they've also managed to recuperate. We'll bring in, some great quality as well. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on Brindis this season? And are there any sort of other ins and outs that I didn't mention there within the squad that are of any sort of significance or importance? Like I said, it's a big year for Brindabella, but they've got a great coach to help them turn it around.
Look, I echo everything that you said. You know, Ray coming in, you know, really Ron Smith and his kind of partner in crime, Milo, the only people in Canberra who can kind of compare to as being as accomplished coaches as he is. So to have him in the second tier it's amazing. But obviously the connections with Ray and Milo at Brindabella have been going on for quite a while. So a fantastic pickup for them, and just a huge boost for morale and look, they went from having one of the best coaches in Canberra already. You know, Zoran was a fantastic coach and got that team playing fantastically well. But, you know, so it's hard to improve on Zoran, but this is probably one of the few people in Canberra that there is that you could improve on him. As I talked about with ANU, what Brindy have, I think, up their sleeve is the consistency of the squad. They have not lost many. It is pretty much the exact same squad with some added firepower. So again, that is something that is going to be, I think, invaluable for them. Really, the only kind of, as you said, big losses were Zach and Nico, and probably also Josh Gunther. That's really about it. 3 players out of an entire squad. It's crazy. Like, even ANU lost more than that. Mm-hmm. And then the guys that you brought in, you know, Curtis, obviously we know, an amazing striker. Whether we get to it or not, I'll tell you, I think out of the top 7 goal scorers in the league last year, 5 of them have gone. And then the only people left, I think Curtis would have been the next highest goal scorer, and he only played half the season before he went to Belconnen. Mm-hmm. So that kind of shows where he is at this level. So he's essentially coming in as now the top striker in the competition. The one who I really think is the ace up their sleeve is Jordan Host. He's come back from the Central Coast, and you know, he was former Canberra United National Youth League player. He is on another level. I saw him play every week at Summer 8 during the summer, and he's just an absolute amazing player, and will absolutely dominate in the central midfield for them. Really teaming up with James Menham and David Gurney, it's actually an extremely strong midfield, one of the strongest in the competition, I think. And, you know, with Curtis up front, they've still got Ollie Weston and Josh Merkel at the back. And there's another, and as you said, Christian Junior, I watched him only 2 weeks ago playing for Tigers. I actually thought he was Tigers' best player, and not in a defensive role. It is the late runs that he makes from fullback up into the, you know, it's that kind of Robertson Liverpool role that he's playing on that left fullback, and he was the probably most attacking outlet, getting that ball out wide, high up in the pitch. People weren't tracking that late run, so playing that in this league, I think he's going to be extremely dangerous going forward, and I think he's really going to struggle with that. And obviously Ray knows him better than anyone. I'm sure he'll be able to get the best out of him. There was another player that they brought in, G. Kangiri, and he scored an amazing goal in the Australia Cup against Queanbeyan, the first goal. So if you get a chance to have a look at that game, a ball over the top, and he took just a fantastic first touch and slotted in. So again, he looks like a bit of a live wire, very fast. So again, another attacking threat. Look, this is a team that came last year, but this is a team I would 100% not be surprised to end up in the top 4 this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sort of hearing you just sort of relay some of the points that I mentioned, but just expanding on that, Chris, I do think that, you know, they do have the potential now to be fighting for a top 4 spot. I mean, you talked about the addition of this team, even though they've lost a fair few players, they've managed to keep a hold of the squad, the majority of the squad, like you mentioned with ANU as well. And I think having, you know, a quality coach in Glavinich last year, and now a great coach and a really, really good coach in Ray Juna come in as well, I think they're going to do some really good things. And I think they'll definitely improve on last year. And I can't wait to see how they'll go. Matt, any final thoughts before we move on to White Eagles?
No, I thought Chris brought some good points there, especially with the amount of youth, the quality youth players coming through. If people are just sort of looking over the Canberra leagues just as a whole and not looking underneath first grade, Brindis were in the NPL 1 last season, and their 18, I know they did technically get relegated overall, but their 18s were like in the top 4 or something like that of their league, and they did sort of. So people probably would think, oh, they're in NPL 2, but that doesn't account for the whole picture. So they were bringing quality youth players, and I think you'll see a few more of them come through, especially with Ray, who would have coached probably. I'm not sure about the actual numbers, but I'm sure a lot of the 23s now would have been under Ray last season at the Brindis. So expect, sort of like we mentioned with that depth, it'll probably help with that familiarity if it comes to that time of season, if you have a decent amount of players out with COVID or injuries or whatnot, or personal things or work commitments, he won't have any issues, I'm sure, calling on those 23, since he is pretty familiar with a lot of them from last season. All right, moving on now to Canberra White Eagles. Their coach this season is Zoran Milenkovic. 2021 position is third place. 2021 points to win-loss record was 8 wins, 2 draws, 6 losses, 26 points overall. White Eagles did finish third, but I think a fair point to bring up is they were originally 4th, but Queanbeyan's 20-plus point deduction meant that they finished. They were pushed up to 3rd. So yeah, that's something probably to consider for all the rankings from about probably 5th, 4th, and 3rd, considering that Queanbeyan finished in 6th. But we'll mention that a little bit later. So essentially, White Eagles had some fantastic results last season against some of the bigger teams. They would always usually show up for these big games, except for against Queanbeyan City. That didn't end too well for them at the beginning of the season, but they did perform better against Queanbeyan City in that second round matchup against them. Probably a good word to sort of explain them last season was just inconsistent, a little unstable as well. When the reason why I mention unstable isn't because the players aren't good or anything like that. It's because they had 4 different coaching changes. Started with Steve Forshaw. Then they had Eric Benet as sort of a placeholder player coach. Then they brought back Graham Plath. He didn't last too long. Then they put Eric Benet once again as a caretaker coach. So I'm sure one thing that they have been looking to sort of fill is not only is to sort of get that consistency. So Zoran will be there. He's got his coaching staff as well as 23's coach Paul Townsley, good friend of the show as well. Mm-hmm. He'll be essentially the assistant coach there as well. I'm sure there'll be plenty of, like we mentioned this a lot. It's great to see that a lot of these clubs are going to be utilising their 23s more, because it's fair to say a lot of clubs in NPL 1 and NPL 2, they were utilising them, but I wouldn't say it was a sort of a big topic last season for a lot of clubs, but it seems like to be a big topic this season. And so that's good to hear. But depth for them, especially because they probably had more injuries, I would say, than any of the other clubs last season. in NPL2. They had quite a few injuries. So it seems like they've not only with the 23 as well, but they've also brought depth in general. They've brought in the likes of Aaron Cashman from West Canberra Wanderers last season, Kaglar, Martin Deng from West Canberra Wanderers, Zach Lawrence, of course, who's been one of Brindy's best players for a while. So they're bringing a lot of first grade NPL2 experience and also players from first grade NPL1 experience to add into that first grade depth there. And then, like I mentioned, they'll have plenty of 23s coming up, I'm sure, as well. There's plenty of other players, but I'll let Chris add any more in that regard. Ultimately, though, for White Eagles, with clubs like this that have a history in Canberra football, their aim would, I'm sure, be promotion, even if they're not saying that publicly. So for them, trying to find that consistency will be key. Like they've already built the depth. That we already know that they always show up for the big matches. I guess it's just those matches where it's just those matches when they're not versing the big sides where they sort of fell last season. So let's wait and see how they do. But considering how much depth they've added and if they can find that consistency and stability, I would say they'll be there or thereabouts in terms of pushing for that top place. What are your thoughts on White Eagles, Webby?
Again, you don't need me on this show because your thoughts are exactly the same. Consistency, the key for these guys. All you have to do is look at their preseason results. A 2-2 draw with Canberra Olympic and then losing. They were down 7-0 and scored in the 90th minute to make it 7-1 against West Canberra Wanderers on the weekend. So, and you can see where that, if you thought last year they needed consistency, well, this year, it's exponential because the turnover has been so enormous. Essentially, they've lost about 10 first graders. There's more than half a squad. And then they've brought in even more. I think they've brought in like 11 or 12 guys. So it's pretty much a brand new team. It's going to take a little while for them to gel. So I really think that they're going to be up and down for the first few weeks. But you look at the quality of the guys that they've brought in, if that team can gel, really, they really should be pushing for promotion. They should be pushing the top two, I think, for that spot. Guys like Aaron Cashman, Martin Deng, they've played at this level and dominated, and they've played at NPL1 and dominated. They've lost Davey McCarran, who was sorry, not Davey, was it O'Connor? They've lost Hassan, which is kind of a bunch of goals there. They've kept Ed McCarthy, which is a huge boost for them, I think. He scored a lot of goals and a lot of important goals. At the winner against O'Connor from, in the 92nd minute, the only game O'Connor lost. And it's just kind of what Ed does. And he I think, is going to be vital for them. But they have just brought in a host of people across the front line. They lost Gabriel up top, who's gone to O'Connor Knights. But to bring in Zach Lawrence, to bring in Chine, so it's Martin Deng again, who can again play across the top. There is a lot of competition for goals up there in the middle. They've still got Dayan in the middle with Kashi. They've really strengthened at the back. Again, they've lost Eric, he's the stalwart of the club. He's been there, since the 1800s, and been dominating the centre back there. But it's a big change. But again, they've kept Reese, they've kept Grex there. So they've added a whole lot of centre backs in. It's just going to be interesting to see how they get this team to gel. On paper, it looks extremely strong, but let's see how it looks on grass. I think that's the real key. Socky has coached at this level forever as well. He knows this competition as well as I do. He's been around here for the last 20 years. So again, and he's just a great guy. So in terms of getting morale up, Socky's one of the best people you can kind of have in that position as coach. So look, this is a team who I think when they're on, they're going to be on, but there is a chance. I just think that they kind of have that possibility that they can just lose games out of nowhere, but they can beat anybody with the firepower that they've added. I think they're going to be a pretty fun team, White Eagles.
Yeah, look, they certainly should be. And I guess one thing we haven't mentioned is with O'Connor going out, that's a massive derby in MPL, in CPL/MPL2 that we will not be seeing this season. Obviously, the Queanbeyan and White Eagles is also just as big. So that will probably be the match that if you're going to go there and watch that match and want an Eagle burger, get there early because it'll be sold out in batches like it was for O'Connor and White Eagles specifically last year, I remember.
To Queanbeyan City, who were going to be coached by Goran Josifovski this season. 2021, their position was 6th, obviously due to what Matt mentioned earlier about the point deduction. We all know what happened there. Their win-loss record was 11 wins, 1 draw, 4 losses. But ultimately, they obviously only ended up on 10 points due to the 20-plus point deduction that they received. So last season, they were under the tutelage of well-renowned coach Gabby Wilk. We all know his resume, how long he's been involved in Canberra football for, particularly, obviously, as we all know, with Tigers. Obviously, they put him in. They got him across to Queanbeyan last season, and I think that was a real indication of Queanbeyan sort of saying, "Well, we want to gain promotion this season," meaning, obviously 2021. That you couldn't help but feel that when they brought in a coach like Gabby Wilk, and they obviously had made a bunch of NPL signings as well on top of that to really steer that, and it just didn't end up happening for them. And ultimately they couldn't beat the 2 main contenders in ANU and O'Connor. They proved to be pretty big stalwarts as well, and obviously the point deduction certainly didn't help their cause either. And I don't think 2021 will be a year that Queanbeyan will want to remember. And I think they'll just want to move on, obviously, from what happened last season and look to progress this season as they look to move forward. Because, last season, and we talked about it numerous times last season, on their day, they were probably the best attacking team in the competition. They just had so much talent, up front with the likes of, Michael Adams and Mark Shields and personalities like that. I mean, when they were on, they had the potential to score sort of 5-6 goals if they wanted to, but they just couldn't find that consistency up front. And then results obviously didn't go their way when they came up against, like I mentioned, the ANU and O'Connors of the world. So in comes Goran Josifovski, who was coached at the club before with success. And, he was a player at the club as well in NPL2 last season, which makes it a smooth transition into the role for him, obviously being familiar with the club and everyone involved. And I think he's tried to sort of calm down the expectations of the club and build it step by step, as he alluded to in his interview with Matt, on Facebook, that everyone can go and see. That's available on our Facebook page. So it's safe to say that the pressure on the team was enormous to get promoted last season, but I don't think it will be as much this season, if that makes sense. It might be the year where they overcome that. We'll just have to wait and see. Obviously, I mentioned Michael Adams and Mark Shields being 2 attacking threats they had last season. Those 2 men are no longer there leading the attacking threat. And obviously they lost Michael Keita as well, who's a little bit of a player that you can sort of stick in different positions, but primarily a central midfielder. He's going to be a massive loss for them too. So those 3 guys notably are sort of some big outs there. And some of the ins that they've managed to bring across, Michael Mensah, Andrew Sellers, Ryan Golevsky, and Bhutanese international Charising Dorji as well. So they've made some exciting signings there. We'll see how they're sort of able to mold into how Queanbeyan go about playing their football this season. So, Webby, what do you think
of Queanbeyan this season, comparing sort of all the sort of inconsistency and trouble that they had last season in 2021, moving into this season of 2022, where they're sort of looking to sort of clear that slate and move forward. So how do you think they're looking to approach this season, and what do you expect of them?
Look, yep, again, everything that you said. Last year, they invested heavily. They had high expectations, and I think those expectations kind of weighed down on coaches and the players, and the wheels kind of started to come off. But as you said, when they were on, the game that they played against Weston Molonglo at Woden Park is the best 45 minutes of football I saw last year from any team. That first half, they were unbelievable. They looks like they would beat most NPL 1 teams the way that they were playing in that game, but they wouldn't. That consistency wasn't there all the time. Some big egos, to manage, and Yoogali kind of manages that by being the biggest of them all, and because he can gain that respect because he's been there, done that as a player and as a coach. But even there's not many who can manage that kind of change room. Gabby is one of the only ones in Canberra who can, but even he struggled, which is, it made it hard. I think this year, getting Goran back in, he's essentially the favourite son of Queanbeyan. He's a highly decorated player with them from the kind of last 15 years, last 20 years, really. Don't want to show Goz's age, but he's been fantastic there. He has tried the coaching gig out, and it hasn't always gone well. It's kind of like a Lampard returning to Chelsea situation. I think the biggest issue was the last time he was there, he was player coach, and anyone struggles with player coach. You have ridiculous talk about having high expectations on your shoulders. You're kind of wearing those expectations double. Now that he's given up the playing role and he's just concentrated on coaching, I think you can see from the recruitment that they've done, it's a much more well-balanced team. I think a team that's rather, going to be out there to kind of work hard for the results rather than, expect the results because they show up onto the pitch. So look, I actually think expectations are quite high for them. Again, huge turnaround, especially kind of up top. But they've brought in a number of players. Actually, so many players, I have no idea how they're going to fit them all in. It's kind of borderline ridiculous how many forwards they've kind of brought in. Obviously, losing Mark Shields and Michael Adams, all those goals, they've kind of gone, we're just bringing 8 strikers and we can replace those goals. You can't play them all on the field at the same time. But in saying that, look, they've brought in some very hard-working forwards. Abby Delahi, I knew very well. I coached him a fair bit at Weston last year. Extremely hard-working. Alex Uricaro, again, I know he's played State 1s at Weston. Extremely hard-working forward. I think that they played those 2 up top with the Bhutanese international kind of behind them, and really actually quite a very different front line to last year, but actually quite an effective front line, I think. In the middle, I think will be interesting. I think they've been playing Dean Tomeski and Felizi as kind of just a flat centre midfield pair. I'm not really sure what depth they've kind of got in that midfield role. They lined up with a 5-2-3 in the cup game. So 2 very attacking fullbacks, which they have in abundance. They've got some quite talented attacking fullbacks. So I think it's actually a smart way for them to play with 3 up top because they've got all those strikers, and they've actually got quite a good number of centre backs now. With Gillespie coming in, with Matty Ryan and some of those guys who are already there. A goalkeeper, I'm interested to see what's happened. I'm not sure if Rory Larkin is still there. I'd be surprised if he is, and if he's not, I'm not sure who their replacement is. So that would be.
He's playing on my state league team. So
well, there you go.
There you go.
There you go. Well, I tell you what, as Rory played striker against us, my 23s team last year. So get him up top. He's quite handy up there.
That's where we're going to stick him. So
yeah. And then if you have a penalty, you can just chuck him in goals.
Yeah, that's right.
But so, look, I think, to be honest, I think he'll be one of the biggest losses for them. I believe they've kept Hassan Faraja, who's a fantastic winger. So, again, another one who could probably play in that attacking fullback role or as one of the top three. So, again, a lot of attacking talent that they've got there. And really, I think, with Goran's kind of understanding of this league and his football now, I think that they're really going to be one of the favourites for pushing. Whether they can push for promotion, look, I'd be surprised if they do, but they definitely will be up there. And I actually think that they very, very likely going to finish in the top four.
Matt, what are your sort of thoughts on Queanbeyan before you move on to Tuggeranong?
It's just interesting how Webby, you were saying there how they've got, it's still pretty high pressure. I guess what they're just trying to dwell the expectations. That's one thing I thought that was very interesting, because people don't like, if people are just like, because I taught like a decent amount of people ask me questions about the leagues and whatnot, and then they're sort of shocked when they say, is there really that much pressure on like teams like Queanbeyan whatnot to go up? And just like, all you have to do is like maybe watch their game against O'Connor. I think that's a very good indication of showing what the pressure was like, or any of those big games where it really sort of, that's the insinuation I got, that it sort of just weighed them down a bit, like you were saying there. To me, that is the biggest takeaway. Obviously the pressure is always going to be on it. Like I mentioned with White Eagles, I would just say it's not as high as it was last season, which considering how it ended up, despite how very well they played in a lot of matches last season, I think it's for the best, because I think you'll see probably a more consistent Queanbeyan in terms of the big games. Obviously, they were very consistent with the games that weren't O'Connor and ANU. So I'm just really intrigued to see how Queanbeyan goes this season. All right, let's get straight into the new blood in terms of CPL. There we go. It will take a while to get used to it, boys. Despite how many times I've written down. Their coach is once again Mitch Stevens. Their MPL 1 2021 position was 8th place, and their MPL 1 2021 points and win-loss record was 0 wins, 7 draws, and 10 losses, I believe. Tuggeranong last season, like we mentioned it at the top of the show, how they were looking like they were pretty strong going into the season. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out for them. They just couldn't score goals at the end of the day. They got 6 consecutive draws in a row, which Russ told us was a record in terms of the NPL version of the Canberra First League. Anyway, then they got that extra draw. It's not like, they could score a lot of goals, but it's not like they were completely outplayed every match they were in. There was a lot of matches where they were in there till the end, only lost by a goal, or the draw was only just by the end. Like there was one match in particular I remember against Olympic, where it looked like they were gonna win the match. I think that was their 7th draw, if I'm not mistaken. And right at the end, Olympic come and get that point. So they just weren't able to hold on to some of those results in the end. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they go in CPL. Mitch Stevens, it's good to see that the club has stuck with him, because as we all know, we've said it many times on the show, Mitch Stevens is one of the best coaches in Canberra. It's just, you could just see it by a lot of the seasons he had at Tuggeranong. I remember Michael mentioned this earlier when we first started the show. Like he was the first coach to get them into Tuggeranong into the finals for a long time. And we mentioned how well they've done with him in the past. Obviously, last season didn't work out, but I think that also attests to how competitive the NPL 1 is becoming at the moment. I get what Webby's going to mention it with probably a few more players that I'm going to mention here, but a lot of turnover, a lot of very experienced players, and a lot of stalwarts at Tuggeranong are moving on. The likes of Gaia, Slavich, Coggan, just to name a few. They're probably a younger team this season. The likes of Luke Stevens, he's a player that we've raved on on the show about from Wagga City Wanderers, as well as Sam Walker, and a little more experience in Adam Furch from Weston Molonglo. Naturally, in terms of with the relegation, there will be probably more of a different hunger than any other team probably has in here to push for that promotion. But if they will, it's going to be really interesting to see. Like we said, they've got the coach, they've got the players, but a lot less experience than they have had in the past. So it'll be interesting to see how they tackle this fresh challenge. And before I move it to Webby as well, we didn't mention this in the Brindabella one, but the Tuggeranong derby between Brindabella and Tuggeranong will now be on in terms of the CPL. So that is a match to look out for on the CPL calendar. Webby, what are your thoughts on Tuggies this season? And feel free to add the players that I didn't mention as well that are either leaving or joining the club.
When I used to play first grade, Weston and Tuggeranong used to be the derby as well. So it's probably it could
that one as well.
Be a bit of a
yeah, I meant more the Tuggeranong derby specifically.
Oh yeah, no, it's the inner Tuggeranong derby. Look, I got a lot of high expectations for Tuggeranong. I know that they had a massive turnover, and some people kind of see that and think, oh, the team's just essentially walked out on them. Look, I'm not. I've got a feeling that Mitch is not really overly disappointed with a lot of the people that kind of he didn't retain, and I think he's quite happy with majority of the ones that he did retain. I think probably his name mistakes me. The Irish boy from the centre midfield, I think he's probably the one that hurt the most. He's moved into state, and an extremely talented player. Hopefully his name will pop in my head soon.
I think it was Shane Murphy.
Shane Murray. Yeah. I think Shane, if he kept hold of Shane, which I think he was really confident of, he had to leave for different reasons. They would have actually, I would say, would have been clear favourites to go back up. Really, they kind of kept the rest of their central midfielders. So Cam Doherty, who's kind of moved into the midfield, and Ewan Peterkin, who's kind of that Conte 6, just breaks up play. And they, again, will be solid in there. Harrison Bunell at centre-back was one of the best centre-backs, one of the best defenders. Funny to say, the team that didn't win a game and lost a lot of games, but he was one of the best defenders in NPL 1 last year, and to hold on to him is absolutely massive, and he's going to be really good. Sean Kinney, again, still there, and an amazing weapon kind of at fullback, or if they play him through the middle or even higher up on the wings. But really, I think picking up Sam Walker is just an absolute amazing pickup. This is someone who played Broadmeadow Magic in Northern New South Wales competition. I remember going and watching Broadmeadow a few years ago play Olympic in the NPL final series, because obviously they won that Northern New South Wales competition. And that Olympic team had just been in the semi-final of the FFA Cup, and Broadmeadow blew them away. And, it's a high level up there. And he is a former, not last year, but a few years ago, former Northern NPL Player of the Year and Golden Boot. So that is an extremely high caliber player for a second-tier team in Canberra to pick up. I think there's going to be high expectations of him. But then you kind of partner him up front with Luke Stevens, who we know is top quality at this league. And they picked up another boy who used to play at Wagga as well, who will probably complete that front three. Look, it's the starting 11 is actually extremely strong. I've seen them play. I've seen Tuggeranong. I've seen ANU. I've seen White Eagles. Weston play so far this pre-season, and Tuggeranong has impressed me the most. The way they've played, their high press, high energy, it's very different to what most of the teams in this competition are used to. And whether they can kind of keep that up for 90 minutes, but I can see them really blowing teams off the park in the first, 30, 40 minutes, and then trying to shut up shop. And I think it's going to be, for me, they will be top 2 favourites. Now, whether they end top 2, they might come 7th for all I know. But going into this league, I'd have them with ANU as my 2 favourites for promotion.
Michael, who do we have next up?
Wagga City Wanderers, coached by David Leonard. The 2021 position was 5th, so just outside the top 4. Their points win-loss record was 4 wins, 0 draws, 13 losses for 12 points in total. Wagga City Wanderers, were a team that were sort of trying to find their way last season after a lot of their winning side left after the 2020 season, in which they had a lot of success in. They struggled to begin with, but they ended up gaining some valuable wins and performances. We started to see David Leonard's side come into their own by, the time the league was eventually stopped due to COVID reasons. But, they've got the likes of, they've lost the likes of, we just mentioned Luke Stevens and Ochang, to name a couple, and managed to gain the likes of Nashorn Suliaman and Jaden Kinches. Similar to Yoogali, usually they have a strong 23s set up with a decent amount featuring throughout the season. So that's something to keep an eye out on. And, Leonard's side will be looking to build on the positive results that they were able to gain last season and the performances as well. But ultimately, they haven't been talked about in this sort of same light as some of the other clubs that we've discussed, and they'll be looking to prove some people wrong, I feel, for 2022. So we'll wait and see what they are able to conjure up. So there definitely could be some upsets on the cards as well, but that's not just to say for Wagga City. I think there'll be numerous upsets given the sort of quality throughout the different teams this season. Chris, what are your thoughts on Wagga for this upcoming season, and any other sort of key ins and outs in relation to the club?
No, look, from, again, they're a bit more of an unknown to us Canberrans. And so kind of, we know the outs, but the guys who are coming in, again, the people that are kind of a little bit foreign to us, so we're not sure what the quality is coming in. But again, quite a stable team, especially a team that didn't go so well last year, didn't get too many wins, and to go through all that travel every week and not pick up too many points, it's very easy for them to have a huge turnover, but to keep that stability again is actually quite impressive. It shows the kind of culture that the coaches have built there. Yeah. We know that Luke Stevens is a huge loss. Jake Ochang, I think, is a massive loss to them as well. He's a talented player. As a 20s and 23s coach at Weston, he's been a thorn in our side for the last 3 or 4 years, including essentially single-handedly knocking us out of semi-finals 2 years ago at that level. So he was quite impressive playing first grade last year. So that's two of pretty much their top goal scorers last year gone. Jake Longes is kind of back. He was really, for me, their star player about 3 years ago. And then I think he had some injuries and then kind of went back to the local league. He played last year, but didn't really get into the goal scoring so much. I think, just coming back. But pre-season this year, he's actually been well and truly in the goals. So I think if they've got a fire in Jake Longes, then he's kind of that talisman, big, strong, fast up front. So I think he will kind of add a different dimension to them. And if they've kind of got that stability in the middle and at the back, look, really, to me, I think it's a team. It's really about confidence. They got the confidence, as you said, that they can spring quite a few upsets on some teams this year.
Next up, we have Weston Molonglo, coach Mark Boyd. 2021 position, 7th place. 2021 points win-loss record, 3 wins, 1 draw, 13 losses, 10 points overall. Weston were another side that struggled with depths and injuries last season. When they were at full strength, they gave some of the big boys some good tests. Ned Jeans is leaving is leaving the first grade team for his work this year. So we wish him all the best. Mark Boyd, he was, people might remember that name on the show. He was most recently coach of West Canberra Wanderers MPLW side. They did really well in 2020. Knew how to take some big results off some of the top teams there. There are quite a few outs for Weston with the likes of Sellers, Albushi, Angus Record, leaving, quite to name a few, and that is a lot of their goals there, especially with Record. I remember he scored quite a few goals last season. In comes Josh Delaney and Chris McEwen, just to name a couple. Not many are talking in terms of big things in terms of Western this season, sort of similar to Wagga, and I'm sure that's the way they would like it, sort of. So they'll be looking to prove a few teams wrong this season and try and pick a few scalps off some of the big teams. Webby, Western's a team you know well. What do you think about Western this season? And are there any more ins and outs that I haven't discussed there that you think are key to mention?
Yeah, look, a lot of outs. It's been quite a big turnover. Josh Wade, goalkeeper, so he's the current captain from the last few years. He's gone down to play state league at Weston. So look, he's another big loss. And as you said, really it's up top. James Noja, Andrew Sellers, Abby Delahi, and Malay. So really that's kind of was the majority of the goals gone, and then Angus Record in the middle, who was the reigning player of the year. So a key core of the team. Defensively, they've pretty much kept most of the defence and actually added some quality players into the back line. So I think defensively it's quite strong. But really the rest of the players are mainly guys graduating from the under-23s team that I've had the last few years. So, look, really, I'm very happy for them to go up. I think that's the way football needs to happen. It's what's in their best interest. So it will be interesting to see, and I'll be very interested to see how they go. Look, there's some pretty good, talented young guys, and who Ned, to be fair, gave quite a lot of them a taste of first grade football last year. So like they're not getting thrown into the fire. A lot of them have got 3 or 4 first grade games under their belt from last season. So, it's just kind of jumping straight into it now. So look, it will be interesting to see. I think they'll still be solid in the middle. There's some pretty handy players that they've retained in that midfield. Chris McEwen coming in from West Canberra Wanderers is an extremely good pickup. He's a very, very versatile player, can play anywhere across the back line, but is extremely handy in that defensive midfield role, kind of to shore things up there. But really, it's just going to be the young guys playing kind of in that final third and seeing how they go this season.
And before we move, I think it's also worth mentioning that the Western team of 23s over the last couple of years have performed pretty well. They've been in the top 4 and whatnot. So they've they are sort of like Brindabella, similar to Brindabella, where the first grade isn't performing as highly as the 23s are. So the 23s are definitely good additions in that regard. Michael, who do we have next up?
Yeah, so next up and last team preview is for Yoogali, coached by Asante Donadell. They finished 4th in 2021, and their points win-loss record was 7 victories, 2 draws, 8 defeats for 23 points. Yoogali struggled with numbers for away games last season, as we discussed on the podcast. This could have seen, this could be seen in their results, when they were on the road compared to when they were at home, playing at their home stadium. They didn't have the depth between the 2 grades either, which really didn't seem to help their cause. And I think it's always such a struggle when you don't have that sort of depth between, your first grade and your 23 to sort of, have that sort of ability to be able to lean on your other squad to be able to bring players up. But Luke Santlin is no longer coaching, but he's still involved in the side. Donadell, who has coached the club before and played, understands the culture and the group. So I think that's really good for them, bringing in a coach that really understands what it is that the club, is and who they are and how they want to go forward. And they did not apply for the Australian Cup qualifying this season. That should help sort of reduce the number of away trips that they'll have to make. Obviously, that's probably the biggest reason why they withdrew from being able to qualify for the Australian Cup and focus solely on the season ahead for them, and improving their league campaign. So they had a terrific run sort of last year in making it into the semis, and they're only eliminated by obviously the eventual winners, Tigers, 5 minutes from the end. So it was a great effort by them. And visa players sort of like Danny Roach and Calvin Roddy have left the club, but in that they've acquired 2 new visa players in Scottish defender Ben Hasty and an Irish striker that Danny sort of helped them sign. So a little recruitment going on there, which is good. They've added some depth as well with their 23s. So they'll be able to lean on their 23 squad a little bit more this year, which is always a positive. And you should be able to expect them to feature throughout the season as well. And lastly, on their day, Yoogali are as good as anyone. We've seen it over the last couple of years, what they can produce when they're in full motion. And, at home, they're a very strong team. They love playing at home. And, if they can keep their squad numbers up for away games and sort of put in really good performances away from home and, take away some victories and even snatch a couple of draws as well in the process, top 4 is in clear sight for them and even promotion. So we'll see what happens when it comes to that time of the season when it's finals football. Webby, what are your sort of expectations for Yoogali this season? And are there any key ins and outs that haven't been mentioned previously?
Yeah, look, again, they're more of an unknown than the rest of the Canberra-based teams, similar to Wagga. Look, last year I think was a bit of a transition year for them. They had the massive highs, 2020, since almost going through that shortened league, undefeated and narrowly winning the league and narrowly losing the grand final. While they retained a majority of their team for last year, there was quite a few of the kind of senior stalwarts only played a handful, a sprinkling of games. It was kind of their transition out, while some of their really, really fantastic, talented youngsters from their 23s team started getting bled into the first grade team. Mason Donadell especially, who amazingly, I think I saw him play a full 90 minutes and then step up and play a full 90 minutes and score a couple of goals in first grade. That pretty amazing stuff. And as you said, they were kind of forced to do it because of the troubles they had. But I think that with that transition and some of those young guys will now kind of be ready to really just concrete their place in the first grade team. And while they held their own in first grade last year, I think now they kind of, with that experience, will be ready to kind of be dominant forces in first grade, some of those young players. So I have high expectations on the team, but really a lot of it kind of depends on the quality of the striker replacing Danny Roach, because he was such a fantastic player. Mm-hmm. It will be tough to replace that quality. As you said, Danny had a hand in picking him, so you hope Danny knew that this is someone who essentially is at a similar level and can replace me. But we'll wait and see, because I think that's a massive loss for them. And Calvin Roddy as well was quite a while he didn't really get too many goals, he was really hardworking up front and very creative force for them. So that's another kind of loss, which I think Mason Donadell will probably really have to be the replacement for that level there. But as you said, really, if they can keep all their numbers and travel with a lot of numbers, then I think that they should be probably the main team pushing Tuggeranong and ANU for that top spot. But if they have similar troubles with numbers and start traveling with 2021 for two teams, and remember we only got a bit over half, 2/3 of the way through the season, so it could have got worse and worse for them in the last 6 or 7 games. So if that happens, again, they might kind of see White Eagles and Queanbeyan or Brindabella kind of sneak past them and drop out of the top 4. So I think it's, again, and we've talked about it a little bit, it's a common theme, depth will play a whole big role. But again, as I said, their 23s, while their results weren't there that much last year, they were actually one of the 23s teams that impressed me the most personally. Some of the individuals were actually extremely talented and like very young, under 23s, but they had 16-year-old, 17-year-old guys playing that under 23s team who were extremely talented. So again, a lot for them to look forward to in the future. So it will be interesting to see how they go. Again, a team that really could push for promotion or maybe not even make the top 4.
Matt, do you want to get into the CPL round 1 fixtures?
Let's start with the first game is Queanbeyan versus Brindabella Blues, Saturday, April 2nd, 3 p.m. at High Street. This should be a very good one because they've obviously most recently played an FA Cup and the Brindies always push Queanbeyan in that regard. Canberra White Eagles versus Wagga City Wanderers, Saturday, April 2nd, 3 p.m. at Woden Park in Close. That should be another interesting one there. ANU versus Yoogali. This is probably the match of the round, I would say. Saturday, April 2nd, 3:15 p.m. at ANU South Oval. Let's see. This will be the real test. First game of the season. If Yoogali can bring the sort of numbers that they were bringing in 2020, like you mentioned, Chris, they have all the quality to do well this season. And then we got Tuggeranong United versus Weston Molonglo. Like you said, a big derby back in the day, two of the Southern/Western clubs in the competition. Saturday, April 2nd, 7:15 at AS Synthetic. So that's where that comes from as well. I'm assuming Canberra still being redone. So that's pretty good. There's at least, even if you want to watch one of those CPL games, you can, if you got free time on April 2nd, you can, at the night, you can go down and watch at AIS Synthetic. Awesome. That's us for our CPL preview. Chris, thank you so much as always. Look forward to having you on the show again. Any last words from you?
No, look, apologies for rambling so long. I think it's probably going to be a long episode for you. But no, look, thanks for having me on, and interested again to see how it all pans out. Look, my fingers are crossed that we actually COVID spike, or probably more importantly, the weather doesn't start taking matches off us.
That's another thing we have to mention. The weather's been crazy this summer, so I wouldn't be surprised if we have more wet rounds as well this season. Michael, thanks again. Any last words from you?
Really interested to see how various teams perform given their circumstances in terms of squads that have managed to bring in a lot of players after losing a lot of players, and those that have actually managed to keep a pretty good squad retention. So we'll just see how everything plays out, but I'm expecting a very sort of close and competitive 2022 CPL season. I don't think you can say definitively who's going to get promoted, which adds to the level of excitement and the element of unknown per se. So looking forward to it.
And you can say the same in terms of relegation, which we don't know. It's not very clear at all. It's going to be very competitive on both ends. All right. And this is our second preview. Next week, we will, Jeremy McGann will be back with us for our MPLW preview. And then after that, all steam ahead for the season, finally. Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. That was episode 45 of the Canberra Football Show. Thanks for listening.